11:18 a.m. Dr. Murray had given an injection, just like he told the police. If prior to that time, Dr. Murray had given an injection any time within those 28 minutes, just like he told the police, then by the time he left at 11:18, as long as we're talking 10 minutes, 11:08, 11:03, or anything before that. Now remember, he said 10:50. And you will notice that from the phone records, the time he said he gave the injection, he was off the phone. If that's what Dr. Murray did, just like he told the police, then by 11:18, no matter what he was doing, no matter what, there was absolutely no danger. There was no chance of harm to Michael Jackson based on what Dr. Murray knew he gave Michael Jackson. That's indisputable. Because of that, because the prosecution knows that, they spent 6 weeks trying to prove a drip. Because without a drip, then what Dr. Murray gave Michael Jackson absolutely would not have harmed him without an unusual and intervening circumstance. And so they spent 5-6 weeks discussing a drip. Now you will note that all of the things that Dr. Schaefer said in his testimony, the prosecution didn't mention to you. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about all the things that occurred during Dr. Schaefer's testimony, during Alberto Alvarez's testimony, during Elisa Fleek's testimony. They didn't talk to you about that. Because they know that during that period of time, during those witnesses, it became clear that what the prosecution was doing, what they were attempting to do, was to create a drip that never existed. And they absolutely refuse to accept the most obvious and reasonable explanation for all of this. That Dr. Murray actually gave Michael Jackson exactly what he said he did. And the reason they refuse to accept it is because they won't tell you what they really want. They want you to convict Dr. Murray for the actions of Michael Jackson. They just don't want to tell you that. So they give you all these, check out the baggy pants. That's for you to decide. But they just won't tell you what they really want. I want to show you the genesis of the prosecution's drip. Mr. Waldron says in opening statement, whether or not this was followed by a continuous drip is for you to decide. He never goes out on a limb on this. And then comes Alberto Alvarez. Now, Alberto Alvarez sat on this chair and with tears welling up in his eyes, told you that it has been so hard for him, so difficult since the death of Michael Jackson. He can't get employment, he tells you. Oh, sure, he's had a couple of celebrity clients, and he's ashamed to say that he's sold on that basis. The agency sells him on that basis. He tells you that it's just been so hard, and then you learn that Alberto Alvarez has been offered $500,000 for his story. Now, how did Alberto Alvarez go from a story that's worth $9,000 to a story that's worth $500,000? Because you know from Kai Chase testifying that that's what her story was worth when all she did was see Dr. Murray up on the stairs. So how did that happen? How did it happen that Alberto Alvarez, when he first spoke to the police on June 25th, 2009, all he did was call 911? But 2 months later, August 31st, 2009, more than 2 months later, all of a sudden, he didn't just call 911. He comforted the children. He tried to breathe life into Michael Jackson. He hid evidence for Dr. Murray. All of a sudden, his story became monumentally more compelling and more valuable. Now, do you honestly believe that when this is over and you go home to your families like I do you honestly believe that Alberto Alvarez is not going to cash in? Honestly? 2 months later, Alberto Alvarez, despite the fact that this, he tells you, these facts are just burning into him, bothers him so much, thinks about it every day. It takes 2 months for him to talk to the police. The reason was given: scheduling. Here's a guy without a job. So the police come 2 months later because their schedules mesh. And they meet at his lawyer's office, along with Fahim Muhammad and Michael Lemire Williams. Alberto Alvarez testifies that Dr. Murray, who barely knows him, they're barely an associate. I mean, I think he said good morning once, he testified. For some reason, Dr. Murray, who had all the time in the world to hide whatever he wanted, and Mr. Waldron said so himself, he chose Alberto Alvarez to hide vials for him, to hide bags for him. He chose Alberto Alvarez, according to Alberto. But despite that, Alberto tells you this during cross-examination. I placed Michael Jackson down on the floor during the 911 call. Gently placed him on the floor. I grabbed his legs. Dr. Murray grabbed his shoulders. Before I did that, Dr. Murray had to pull out the IV. Before we did that, Dr. Murray had to put a pulse oximeter on his finger. And then I grabbed his legs gently. Dr. Murray grabbed his shoulders gently, and we laid him on the floor. That was his testimony. When I played in the 911 call, you saw how he looked up on the stand because he realized that was impossible. And you get that 911 call, take it back with you, and take a listen. I asked Alberto Alvarez, show us how you took off that bag. And he grabbed it right at the top, as you recall. And he curled it around this metal hook. Remember that? And he grabbed it exactly where, if you look at the bag, and you get to have that as well, where the fingerprint boxes were. Where later they fingerprinted that bag. Exactly where you would expect those fingerprints to be. But here's the problem, though. They were not Alberto Alvarez's. That's been stipulated to. And those fingerprints were identifiable. Alberto Alvarez says, well, there was a milky substance in the bag. It's clear. It tested negative for any drug. There's nothing in that bag. Nothing. He tells you that he performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. In fact, he told you that he carefully placed Michael Jackson on the floor before the paramedics arrived, and you met Richard Sennett, who you know has no axe to grind, who told you, I walked in, Michael Jackson's on the bed. And no, he's not doing CPR.